tax on gasoline, because it's already got a tax on it. You know, so in Townsend, who coming through town, I mean, what are you gonna collect a sales tax? You don't have a bunch of hotels, you don't have a bunch of restaurants, you don't have a bunch of bars. I mean, so a local option sales tax is gonna help, in my view, the segments of Montana, a standalone one, the segments of Montana that already have the economic opportunity to grow. The major cities that have the retail, that already have increasing populations because people are migrating there, that attract business, attract manufacturing. You know, people want to be in Bozeman, they want to be in Missoula, they want to be in Billings. And if you let those population centers get the benefit of a consumption tax and create property tax for their people, it does nothing to help the economy of the rest of the state of Montana. My view is if you could get to a consumption tax, you would use the bulk of it to relieve property taxes, a little bit of it to take the regressivity out through the income tax system, probably rebate people so they would, you know, low-income people would get some offset. But then you would take the rest of it, you'd put it into the school funding system and reduce the school levies where 50–60% of the property taxes anyway, and that would go a whole way to maintain an equalization of school funding. It would do a lot to increase the state standing as part funding its share of the basic system that the Constitution requires. And it would take money collected in the urban areas and distribute it across the state in an equal manner. There will be no other way you can distribute that. That money, again, will all be collected by and large in the 6–7 largest cities, even a statewide sales tax. Well, they're going to have most of the legislatures anyway, as you keep prying that money back out of Helena to help rural Montana. The only way you can do that, I think, is through the school system. If you start putting it into grants to TSEP programs like roads and sewer and water, the large cities are going to still eat most of it up. They'll get most of it through the school system also, but at least it'll free up a lot of the property tax, I think, in the rural Montana to fund local services. We'll see. We're a ways from that yet.
Well, I gotta leave pretty quick, I gotta go to a deposition, but, so what are we hearing, what I think we're hearing, because our problem then, you know, is we got residential growth everywhere. You know, we got houses everywhere that are new and being built, they don't come on the tax roll right away, and we're felt like our services are being demanded before the revenue's catching up. So what I think I hear you saying is that the only way for a local government to increase revenue beyond that when they eventually come on is through a voted mill levy, is that correct? Are there options for the county commission to increase other things besides a voted levy?
Not a whole lot. I mean, you can move things to fees if you have some way of justifying a fee. I assume you're already on a fee for garbage collection and the easy things. Spatial districts, but again, you know, they have to be voted, you know, road districts, that type of thing. I don't know how it is in this county. I know in my county, the county don't take over any new roads. You know, when you build a subdivision, you're responsible for your own. You build them to county standards, but you're responsible for maintaining them. We don't. County doesn't do it. They can't keep up with the road system that they've got right now. And the only local option tax out there is the gas tax that counties can impose. And in Broadwater County, I don't know if that would be a bad thing. I mean, there's only 2 gas stations in Broadwater County, just about. 3. And people stop at them. I mean, I stop at them just because I need gas. I don't see if they're 2 cents more than Three Forks or East Helen. I mean, that's what it is. You know, the local option vehicle tax, I assume you're already doing that. And actually a interesting feature just because the local option portion is still ad valorem. You know, it's not like the state fee, which is a flat, you know, the basic fee, which is a flat fee, so it really only grows when you get number of cars, not, or the age of the fleet, so. Yeah, the things are limited, but, you know, I just don't know what other really options you have. The people you're gonna get the money from are pretty much the same people I know, unless you can make use of the people going up and down the highway out here. Although the recreation portion of this county probably is more significant than I realize. I don't know what all goes on here, but again, getting to them without some kind of a consumption tax is the thing, and I don't know if you'd even, you know, in this county, if you'd even get much out of that. You know, a lot of that's just so easy to avoid because it's cash economy kind of thing.
The local gas tax is only, it's not on diesel, it's only on unleaded, right?
What?
The local gas tax is only on unleaded fuel, it's not on diesel, right?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that because no one's ever got that point of. I mean, the argument that always comes up on local gas taxes, you know, you distort the market. You have this person is taxed and this one isn't, and they're only a block apart. But when you don't really have that option in a county, you know, it's probably. But then again, like with all consumption taxes, local people pay them too. You know, it's just another way the same people, what pocket they take the money out of.
Well, thanks for coming, Bob. I gotta run to a deposition, but
Good to see you, Corey.
there's a bunch of donuts here. I'm the only one that ate one so far. So.
Hey Bob, do you think that there's any change in thinking with taxes? So property taxpayers are getting to the point where they're tapped out. They're paying everything they can, and you're seeing a lot of the mill levies that are out there being voted down. The 2-year cycle, they're seeing the increases every 2 years, and then they're seeing us at this level losing mills because of that growth, and so they're seeing their tax bills go up, yet we're losing mills. Do you think that with all of that going on that there might be a change in thinking that, you know what, we are becoming a recreation economy? That is one of the top economic drivers for the state now. Certainly it is for Broadwater County. Do you think there's a change of thinking that maybe taxing those visitors is a good way to go instead of always going to the people who own property?
I think that's the hope of some of the folks who are looking at this study will show that you know, we've ridden this horse as far as we can ride it. We get better start looking for some other mode of transportation, knowing that you're still going to have to get that by the voters of Montana, and that's the hard part because, you know, people, as much as they hate the property tax system, it's the devil you know as opposed to the one you don't know. They don't have any trust that they will get property tax relief by putting in a sales tax, and that's why I think you have to. Well, first of all, it's an education thing, just like you're doing here today. You know, where does the tax revenue come from and where does it go? Because a lot of people don't know that. They pay their tax bill to the county, so they assume that that's where it goes. And you just distribute it and keep a small portion of it. But
And we're the ones that raise it when it goes up.
yeah, but I saw, I don't know what your tax bills look like this year, but a lot of the counties are starting to put a little graph on their tax bill that says, this is schools, this is county, this is city. And so starting to educate people on, you know, where their dollars are really going and who should they be looking at with their tax problem. You know, school boards don't get a whole lot of grief over, unless they run a bond to build a new building or something like that, you know, because most of them are at the top, they're not having to go out every year for it used to be they had to vote their operation levy every year. Even though they didn't ask for any more money, they had to vote it, and the legislature, we finally told them, you don't need to do that anymore because you're just confusing people. They think every time they're voting for a tax increase, when most time they're voting is just to pay what they were paying. If they don't vote for, and besides which, the court cases say that schools have to spend this anyway, so, yeah, they have to try to raise the money, but it's, just, people need to understand that, knowing that, again, whether you collect it from them as a sales tax or a property tax or an income tax, you kind of have the same pool of people you're going to, but the pool that's being missed are two. One is the travelers coming through, and the other one is the retailers selling into Montana that don't have any bricks and mortar here, that are competing against what used to be your downtown. First the big box stores killed your downtown, and now the internet marketers are killing the big box stores. Who was the first big box? Who was the first, what we think of today as an internet sale? It was Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward. Where are they? They went from selling through the post office, through a catalog, to building bricks and mortar. And neither one of them are in business anymore. Just how the economy changed. Now we're back to buying things remotely, and that's coming from overseas or out of the state. And those people aren't contributing anything particularly to our tax base. Now people say, well, yeah, you put a tax on them, that's going to cost Montanans more. Well, it may or it may not, depending on if you can offset the property taxes.
But it sounds like the states had the ability to not mill their 95 because of values, but they've continued to choose to do so. So it kind of goes back to my thinking of Governor Bullock's, I want my $400 million slush fund, is kind of the sense of where that money's going, is that we're not going to reduce, we have the ability to reduce the amount of mills that we're milling, but we're going to choose not to, so we can have this huge surplus of money that seems to disappear without any real understanding or idea where it went. But is that, I guess, in an aspect of trying to get citizens to educate, but then how do you build their trust? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, if the state knows that they don't need to mill 95, but they continue to do it, and then they shortchange counties by limiting what they can achieve in growth, like in the last census, Broadwater County, I think, was a 29% growth increase from the last census. I think Gallatin was at 32. And I believe those were the only two counties in the state of Montana that had that type of growth visualized in that last census. So if the state is not our friend, obviously, because they are not attributing, they're not reducing theirs. They're saying you as a local government get to sit on this little tiny 0.5% growth, but here even though we don't need 1,095 mills, we're going to do it anyways, and we're just going to deposit the money into whatever account we want. That doesn't seem very trustworthy, and I think that's where citizens of Montana are going, enough's enough. So unless I'm seeing this wrong.
No, I think you're seeing it right. I make that same argument too, that, you should be down to about 90 mills. That no big deal to most taxpayers, 5 mills, but it helps a little bit. A mill at the state level is about $3 million, so that would cost the state $15 million out of the billion-some dollar budget. It's crazy, but it's what it is.
Well, and if I may, the other the issue that we see is, we look at, everybody in Gallatin is moving to our south end of the county,
And why are they doing that?
because
Because your taxes are lower,
taxes
right?
are low. So our mill value is $17,626. You jump across that county line and you look at the 17-18 numbers of the mill value of Gallatin County, it was 291,000 and change. So when you build a house in Gallatin County, you're gonna spend between $8,000 and $10,000 in fees before you ever touch your ground. And we don't have that because we don't have zoning, but the fact is we can't afford to have zoning because we don't have the money to pay somebody to zone. So, the state really, in their inability to recognize that they're impacting the whole state's rural. I mean, under federal guidelines, anything under 150,000 is rural, so every county in the state's rural. But they're impacting these smaller communities such as Jefferson County, Broadwater County, Madison County, and places, because their mill value is so minimal and everybody next door is so high. So everybody's jumping ship, and Los Angeles, everybody's coming from California, and that's why it's called Los Angeles. But they got the money to do that, but everybody else is coming over here expecting the same services they got, if not more, and we have no ability to levy anything or increase taxes or whatever, or visualize any growth. So when we recognize the fact that we have a 29% growth, we get to visualize 0.5. So, I mean, how does a small county that's growing at a substantial rate keep up with the times and be able to afford?
This gets back to something Corey was talking about, and it's more about timing than anything, and it's a problem that Mako and the league and I have tried to work on in the past with the Department of Revenue, and that is identifying newly taxable property in the proper way so that, local governments get half of the rate of inflation against their old base. But they also get newly taxable property to apply those means to. Well, part of the problem is timing. You build a house, it isn't valued till January 1st of whenever the department finds it. So you don't get money from it till November of that year. You don't have to reduce your mill levies because of increase in taxable value of new property. That property becomes additional revenue. But I believe, the way that they do newly taxable property across the board is that you only get part of it because they offset it with lost property, with depreciated property, and a whole lot of other stuff. So, if you had 10 new houses, my example is this. If you're a tax in jurisdiction that has 2 houses in it, and one of them burns down, by law you can double the taxes on the remaining house to generate the same amount of revenue you had. That's the way 1510-420 works. So then the next year somebody replaces that house, so you're back to 2 houses. You don't have to cut your mill levy in half. You get to apply that high mill levy to both properties, so you have twice as much money as you had before the house burned down. But I think the way the Department of Revenue figures newly taxable property, they say, well, you had 2 houses, one burned down, you build a new one, you still got 2 houses, so you don't have any newly taxable property. And so I think a portion of your newly taxable gets eroded in the process. It gets offset by depreciation in the other classes, property that goes away, things like that. So you don't get, if growing counties got all their newly taxable, the 0.5% of growth wouldn't be that big of a deal to them. But the other thing gets back to what I said much earlier, that most of this newly residential property, every one of them you get costs you more in services than they pay in taxes anyway. So it's kind of a losing proposition. Even though, when you build a subdivision or build a new house, the county generally doesn't have to build a new road. They're building where there's a road. You have more maintenance probably. You have to upgrade the road or something like that because of more traffic. But you have more law enforcement because you have more people. But it's just, costs go up, and people. Part of the problem is people see their property tax bill once every 6 months, once a year really, and so it's a big thing to them. If they're paying an escrow, it's probably not a big a thing to them, I don't know. I mean, if people paid their income tax bill once a year instead of every pay period, there'd be an uproar on what your income tax is, but too many people look like that as a savings account, you know, we'll over withhold so we get a refund back. Not they're taking 20% of my money and I'm never gonna see it again. You guys have to be in Winston at 10?
We do.
I'm here as long as you wanna be here, I don't have to be home till I get home, so.
Okay. Cows will wait for you, huh?
So I have a quick question.
Yes.
So is that how, your analogy that you just used with the house burning down, is that how Gallatin County the commissioners raised their taxes by $2 million because of the loss of mills? It was not voted, they raised their taxes. In the way I understood it was because of their growth was so much. They said they cannot keep up with their growth, they needed more deputies, they needed more road people, and they raised it. So was that how they did that, was basically,
Well, I think some of it was, they had more property to tax, their taxable value went up, so when you applied those same mills to it, you got more money. The other part of it may have been, there's also a clause in the law that says if you don't use all your mills that you're allowed, you can carry them forward. And they may have not been milling their full allowable mills, and they may have imposed some of those mills also to get some. I don't know exactly what happened in Gallatin County. All I know is that the city, the school passed a bond to build a new high school, the city passed a bond to build a new jail, and the county tried to build, they tried to build you probably know more about this than I do, they tried to do a consolidated jail. That didn't get accomplished like the one, so the city went ahead and built their own jail, and now the county wants to build a new law enforcement center too, and you know, they're $60 million facilities or something like that. But they're under the same limits of everybody else, it's just that those areas that have rapid growth have more revenue to spend. Now you have apparently rapid growth here, but it's pretty much all residential, and you know, it comes on the rolls. Some of it may be a year, some of it may be 2 years, some of it may not, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking to a person in Helena, and he went about 2 years for his house, and the only reason his house got on the rolls is he went in and told him it wasn't on the rolls because he didn't want to get caught for not having it on the rolls, and he still thinks his neighbor house isn't on the rolls, and it's been 4 or 5 years, so. I mean, part of that gets back, I guess, to the legislature has, you know, the budgets got tight and they start laying off people. The second biggest department's the Department of Revenue. And the biggest portion of the Department of Revenue is the Property Tax Assessment Division. And as you know, in this county, they're closing offices. And so you don't have a local person driving around seeing what's out there. They're basically depending on the sewer and water permits and the electrical permits to find new property. And if there isn't a permit, they don't find it maybe for a while, and even if there is, they may not find it, because most things have to have one or the other. So I'm not, it's kind of like cars, you know, when vehicles used to be locally taxed, and the money went to the treasurer, and you divided it up, and when we simplified, it's just, you know, send all the money to Helena, and we'll send you back what you had in 2001 with a growth factor on it. There's really, other than the local option tax, there's really no incentive for the treasurer to go out and track down people who don't have a Broadwater County license plate anymore. It used to be in the big counties, you know, they'd put people out in the parking lots all the time, finding people that, you know, were habitually there that didn't have a local license plate, and, you know, tell them you better come in and explain why you don't have a local license plate, or you better get one, because they would get the money from it. And I don't know, you know, people used to at least in Yellowstone County, used to always license their cars in Carbon or Stillwater somewhere just because they didn't want to have that 3 on their license plate when they went hunting.
Well, now we have 300 different specialty plates.
Yeah, that's the worst thing that ever happened. I don't know, nobody comes in and opposes those, and it was bad enough when you had 4 or 5, and now, but how many you got hanging on the wall in the treasurer's office? You can't even put them all up there anymore. So you don't know if the Montana license where they're from or anything anymore.
No.
It's crazy. That was the worst thing about when they were able to do the embossed plates and didn't have to stamp them all. You could have, anybody that with a computer program could make up their own plate. But it's a challenge, and it'll continue to be a challenge until we figure out how to get a system that isn't so dependent on the property tax, I think. And I don't know, maybe in my lifetime we'll get there, maybe it'll come faster than we think, but it'll take a concerted effort between the governor's office, the legislature, and taxpayers to, the trust of the system is the big thing, and fortunately we have some laboratories out there that show how it works, and that's the towns that have the West Yellowstones and the Whitefishes that have the local option tourist tax. It's only limited to certain small towns, and most of those have done what their law requires. They put a lot of that money back into infrastructure, so when they take those to vote for renewal, they're successful because people see that. It's just not everybody's a West Yellowstone or a Whitefish that has, hundreds of thousands of people coming through the door that are used to paying sales taxes and don't mind paying it. And a lot of Montana doesn't have that opportunity even if you gave it to them. They couldn't generate a nickel of sales tax money with the local option sales tax anyway, because they have nothing, no retail of any size to tax that isn't pretty much just a local business anyway. So my thought process has always been as more people move to Montana from out of state and get, that are used to sales taxes and get concerned with the property taxes, that maybe that thought process will change some. But you need leadership from the top down to make it happen. People say it's gotta be a grassroots effort up, but the only grassroots efforts that are successful coming up work the opposite way. They limit and they reduce and they eliminate taxes. That'll be, I think that if nothing happens, that'll be the straw that drives it, is someone will put an initiative on the ballot just to eliminate the property tax. That happened in the 80s, actually, and the legislature was able to put the other one on that froze them, and both of those were on the same time, and the elimination almost passed and the freeze did pass, and so that's what happened in the late 80s. Before little old lady from Ravalli County ran a petition to eliminate the property tax, and it just about happened. Then it didn't have any other source of revenue. It wasn't a replacement. It was just, you're not going to pay property taxes anymore.
So Bob, if we do go to a sales tax, what happens in times of recession?
That's been one of the knocks against consumption taxes, that in recession, your revenue stream falls. But the same can be said about income tax. What I believe in this day and age, most people spend more money than they make anyway. And so I don't think the sales tax is as recession sensitive as it used to be, maybe. People still buy stuff. They might not buy as much. Our most volatile tax in Montana is the corp tax. It'll do 200 million, it'll do 50 million. It just depends on what's happening in the economy with corporations. So that's the one that really drives legislators into special session. Not the income tax, not the property tax, it's what happens with the corp tax. And some of the natural resource taxes that tend to follow. So, I mean, the property taxes, you know, are stable. You gotta, whether you have money or not, you gotta pay your property taxes. Income taxes are pretty, all that happens generally in a downturn with income taxes is they generally don't grow as much. It's not that you really don't collect, that your collections go down. I'm not certain we've ever, maybe in 2009, we might have had a decrease in income taxes, but I'm not certain that the income tax stream has ever decreased. It just maybe flattened out a little bit. And I think states that have a sales tax are actually starting to think they're a little bit more stable even than the income tax. Just because people's habits now are, you know, the taxable things, you tend to buy them whether you have the income right then or not, just because everyone has credit. But what I was gonna point out was, you mentioned that, you know, we should have a 5% sales tax or something. A lot of people don't realize that in 1993, when the last sales tax was on the ballot, there was another measure on the ballot that limited the statewide sales tax to 4%. And so it can only be 4%. Now, it didn't limit the base, so the way you generate more money with the sales tax is what you tax under that 4%. You know, most sales taxes were goods-based taxes. Now they're starting to go to service-based taxes for more and more of the economy of services. And in a recreation economy, most of it's services. And so then you have to figure out how to tax services without taxing services between businesses, because generally that's bad, is because then you pyramid. You know, if you tax an accountant that's selling or the services to a manufacturer, then that gets built into the cost of the product. Or if you tax inputs into a business, and then we had a sales tax. It wasn't a sales tax, it was more of a value-added tax in the last couple sessions that Representative White out of Bozeman proposed. And they had basically taxed all transactions, other than maybe groceries or something like that. And so the way it would have worked, like if you take the sawmill here, it would tax when the tree owner sold the tree to a logger, it would tax that transaction. And when the logger sold it to the mill, it would tax that transaction. And when the mill sold the lumber to the wholesaler, it would tax that. And when the wholesaler sold it to the retailer, that was taxed. And then the retailer sold it to the consumer, that was taxed. But it was like at 2% or something. And it generated a whole lot of money because you were taxing all this stuff, but you were pyramiding the tax through the system. So basically, every tax got, if it was a 2% tax the first time, it was 2% plus 2% of 2%, and that pyramids through. And so tax theory says you don't want to do that, so you have to figure out how to do that even in the tax and services. But it would open up some of the economy. Right now, because of a Supreme Court decision almost 2 years ago now, states can tax, sales tax, sales coming into their state even though the seller has no physical presence in the state. It used to be you couldn't tax anybody in your state unless they had a physical presence, either a salesman, a building, warehouse, or something like that. Now you can do that, so a lot of states are starting to track sales coming into their state through Amazon or those companies because they're willing to collect the tax for them. So if you're selling into a sales tax state from another state, they can collect the sales tax on the state that the sale is made into, can collect the sales tax. Well, there are Montana businesses now that are going to have to start paying sales tax or collecting sales taxes on things that they sell from Montana into other states. That's just the way it's going to happen. So there's going to be a certain number of businesses in Montana that have to start collecting sales taxes if they're selling goods and services to states that have a sales tax. And most of them are setting up now to do that. So it kind of changes the dynamics of how that all works with who pays and who collects. Just so companies don't have that advantage over the local seller. The local seller has to collect the sales tax, someone selling in remotely didn't have to collect it before. It's gonna level that playing field a little, and so when that gets to some Montana businesses, they're gonna find out that they're collecting sales taxes for a bunch of different states, and that'll be a new challenge for Montana businesses, or they'll figure some way to sell to a middleman that takes care of all that. They'll end up reducing their economic advantage because we don't have a sales tax in Montana. All right, well, thanks.
All right.
Sure appreciate
Bob.
this. Thank you. Does anybody know, hey Doug, do you know what our school rate is?
Percentage. Just looked at that yesterday.
It's close to 60%, isn't it?
Mine says 63.1.
Yeah,
I would guess,
Yeah.
yeah.
you gonna get this book?
Yes, it's invaluable.
Well, we
I've been a member
We
for,
appreciate the membership.
yeah, it's actually also been invaluable.
Above yours.